The concepts we're talking about today apply to any urgent crisis that may strike your site, from natural disasters to violent incidents such as a shooter to dangerous situations like hazardous material spills and gas leaks. Today we are going to focus, though, on tornadoes. Tornadoes are a grave threat, as we all know, not only because they're so destructive, but also because they're so unpredictable and happen with so little warning. So first, who's at risk? Here's a visual showing the past 56 years of tornado tracks. You see that almost the entire eastern half of the U.S. is at high risk for tornadoes. The Midwest and the Plain States, of course, and also the Gulf States, Florida, the eastern seaboard, and all the way up to Michigan and Wisconsin. If you're in one of those areas, you likely already have an emergency plan for tornadoes. And you know, typically the goals are to rapidly move everyone at your site to shelter locations if there's a tornado warning, and secure your site to the extent possible to make recovery easier. In a moment, we'll talk about emergency communications, but first, let's briefly talk about what a safe shelter location is. While there's no place, unfortunately, in the path of a large tornado that's 100% safe, OSHA recommends a small interior room or hallway on the lowest floor possible. And the best bets are rooms constructed with reinforced concrete, brick, or block with no windows and a heavy concrete floor or roof system overhead. Avoid auditoriums, cafeterias, and gymnasiums and other buildings that have flat, wide-span roofs. If you have a large site with multiple shelter locations, obviously you'll have to plan who will go where in a tornado emergency. And you may have people at your site with disabilities or injuries that hamper their mobility, so you'll work through plans for getting them to safety as well.
Training and drilling on your emergency plan is critical. However, it's impossible to replicate actual emergency conditions during a drill, no matter how realistic the drill is. During a real emergency, you need a way to communicate with everyone at your site. Every crisis is different, and you can't plan for everything that may happen. You will want the speed and flexibility to broadcast special emergency instructions before, during, and immediately after an emergency event. In addition, at any given time, most sites have visitors or new employees who haven't been trained, and in a real emergency, some people will panic no matter how much training they've got. Effective emergency communications lets you immediately broadcast and repeat clear, specific directives so people don't have to think through what they should do. They simply need to follow instructions. With that in mind, here are the 5 baseline things you need from an emergency communication system. These capabilities help you maximize your ability to protect your people and your site in a tornado or other emergency. Modern facilities-based emergency communication systems should provide all 5 of these capabilities. We will show you one of the systems in a little bit, but first, let's look at each critical emergency communications capability in more detail. The first thing you need from your emergency communication system is the ability to reach everyone at your site within seconds. Once a tornado warning is issued, you don't have a second to waste. According to NOAA, you actually have an average of about 13 minutes after a warning is issued to get everyone into a shelter location. If you're responsible for large numbers of people at an industrial facility, an office building, or a university campus, for example, that's not a lot of time. You need to reach everyone instantly, including people indoors, people in parking areas and other outdoor areas, and visitors to your site. Let's take a look at some of the typical communications layers that most places have in place. Many communities use tornado sirens, outdoor sirens, to alert people, but those are often not audible indoors. Text and email alerts are very useful for sending out information to large numbers of subscribers, but they aren't a good primary method for extremely urgent situations. When you send a large number of emails or text alerts, they go into a queue, and it may take up to an hour to reach the recipient. In most cases, the recipient also has to be subscribed to receive alerts. They have to have his or her cell phone turned on and charged, etc. Finally, in a mass emergency, those networks can get overburdened, and so the delivery of the emergency information may slow down even further. Many people have traditional PA systems where they can make voice announcements on site, but these can also pose certain problems. Some PA systems only reach specific areas of a facility. In addition, they won't likely reach people in noisy areas such as industrial floors. They may also tie you to a specific announcement location, and that can be dangerous for the person assigned to making the announcement. And finally, if you have a multi-building site with separate PA systems in individual buildings, a tornado emergency may not give you enough time to physically go to each building to alert the people at that site. These are some reasons why a modern, facility-based emergency communications system exists and why they're designed to let you broadcast to an entire facility or a campus instantly, from any location, on or off site. They often combine audible alerts with flashing lights and on-screen text so they reach everyone, even in loud environments, and people with hearing impairments.
Let's move to the second thing you need from an emergency communication system, the ability to communicate actionable instructions. People used to use their fire alarm systems for all emergencies, but the problem is fire alarms are intended to do one thing, evacuate the building. In a tornado and many other emergencies, as we know, evacuating the building is the worst course of action. In some places, tone systems were put in place to deal with this problem. Tone systems that notify people about different types of emergency. A set of incidents were defined in advance, and a unique tone or siren was assigned to each. This is how tornado sirens tend to work. There's typically a tone for tornado watches and another tone for tornado warnings. Unfortunately, in a real crisis, tone systems are confusing, even for people who have been trained to know what they mean. The third thing you need your system to do is target different instructions to different locations simultaneously. If you have a very small site, this probably isn't necessary. But at a large site, you will likely want to broadcast different instructions to different areas during a tornado warning. For example, if you have a site with large parking facilities, you may want to provide special emergency instructions to anyone in those areas. A vehicle is a dangerous place to be in a tornado, but many people may attempt to get in their cars and outrun the storm. So you may want to have your system broadcast instructions in parking garages, reminding everyone to leave their vehicles and seek shelter in the nearest building. In addition, sites that have hazardous materials to secure or large machinery to power down before the storm may want to broadcast special instructions to those areas. Typically, people are trained to secure hazmat materials and machinery. Audible emergency reminders reinforce that training and minimize panic in a crisis. With a modern emergency communication system, you can broadcast a variety of targeted instructions simultaneously at the press of a button or click of a mouse.
The fourth thing you need is redundancy. Modern emergency systems typically rely on wired Ethernet or Wi-Fi networks to transmit alerts and calls for help. These systems typically operate on a site's local area network. However, it's not uncommon for networks to go down, especially in emergency conditions and especially when power systems fail. In the same way that important electrical systems need batteries in case power goes out, critical network-based systems need backup communications to ensure that they will continue to operate if local networks fail during a crisis. Not all backup networks are equal. For example, cellular networks are not ideal for backup purposes because both voice and data tend to get overloaded and are unreliable in high-demand emergency conditions. Ideal emergency networks are independent of other communications channels so that emergency messages don't have to compete with other communications to get through. For example, the MetaSecure system uses a backup independent wireless mesh network. So you can still communicate to everyone at your site even if the cell network, the landlines, the internet, or local area networks all fail. Wireless mesh networks were originally developed by the military for that exact purpose. They're considered a self-healing network. They automatically route around any failure points. For example, if tornado damage was to take out an endpoint or a series of endpoints, the network would automatically reconfigure, and you could still communicate over the wireless mesh network. A fifth emergency communications need is two-way communications
with shelter areas and individuals in need, both during an emergency incident and afterwards. During a tornado warning, emergency managers typically need to account for people who are on site. According to OSHA, workers, visitors, and customers should be accounted for as they arrive at tornado shelters. If there are multiple buildings and shelters at your site, emergency managers may need to confirm head counts and communicate status updates. You can't count on cell phones and data networks to be available during a mass emergency. Help stations with two-way communications at each shelter location running on independent communications networks let emergency managers keep on top of conditions throughout a large site. When someone presses a help button, he or she can communicate directly with security or emergency managers, and the call location is transmitted automatically. Help stations are also valuable after the storm, as your team cleans up any damage. A study of injuries after one tornado in Marion, Illinois showed that 50% of the tornado-related injuries were suffered during rescue attempts, cleanup, and other post-tornado activities. Because tornadoes often damage power lines, gas lines, or electrical systems, there is a risk of fire, electrocution, or an explosion. It's valuable to have an on-site independent emergency communications network that lets people throughout the site communicate directly with incident commanders to report problems and to call for help.
So today's focus is tornadoes and extreme weather in general, but it's best and most cost-effective to take an all-hazards approach to communication. You want your system to give you the flexibility to deal with whatever emergency arises. There are 3 different actions you may want people to take in all-hazards emergency situations. First, you may want to instruct people to shelter in place in extreme weather and sometimes in the case of nearby hazardous materials spills. Second, you may want to instruct everyone to evacuate the building or multiple buildings. And third, in the case of violence at your site, you may need to instruct people to lock down and take shelter behind locked doors. Now, let's briefly look at an example of a modern emergency communication system. This is a screenshot of our command center software that's used to send alerts to your site and receive calls for help from people in need. This software is hosted on a server, which means that all designated people can access the software from any computer on or off site. So if there's a crisis at your site during off hours, emergency managers can send alerts from home or wherever they may be. We're also releasing a new mobile interface so you can launch alerts to your site from tablets and smartphones. And here's the hardware. These are emergency help stations. And they're typically installed at strategic locations at a facility, building, or campus. And when you launch an alert through the software, these broadcast intelligible voice instructions along with sirens and flashing lights. They also display the emergency instructions in text on the built-in LCD screen, which is especially useful in noisy environments and for people with hearing impairments. In addition, each one has a help button. Anyone who presses the button can speak directly with security and emergency managers, and the location is transmitted automatically. These are easy to install. They tie into a site's existing wired Ethernet or Wi-Fi infrastructure. And then the backup wireless mesh network that we talked about earlier is built into each help station. So it takes just a few gateway devices and the mesh network forms automatically.
So Joanne, if you'll switch over to our live demo system, we can show the system in action. So we have we're in our demo studio, and we have a couple of units live in studio with us. What we have in terms of our command center software is on the right-hand side here, we have a map that shows us the site plan, and we can look at some of the building locations and be able to see down to a floor plan level. On the left here, we have the alerts window, and you can see a series of instant alerts. And these are specifically constructed ahead of time so that the messaging is approved and consistent. The locations have already been targeted, and any integration, any other systems that will be that this message will be distributed to are already queued up and pre-approved. And this lets us send out high urgency messages very, very quickly, and we'll show that to you in just a second. In the bottom left corner, we have the area window where our requests for help come in, and that's when someone presses a button on one of the help stations, and we can do a live voice conversation, and you would see that in this map area. You would see the location of that call for help and be able to know immediately where that originated. And then finally, in the bottom right here, we have a log area where everything in the system is logged and archived for future reference. But we keep a 24-hour log down immediately available, so you can see who's logged in, what alerts have been sent, and so forth. Joanne is going to also bring up a picture of this is a video view of the unit that's in the room with us. I always like to wave my hand in front there so that you know we're live. At this point, I'll send off an instant alert for a tornado warning, and you can watch the unit to the right go off, and as well as hear it over the phone. So one click on the alert, and we get a confirmation pop-up where you're sure you want to send this alert, and it tells us a little information. It's a tornado alert and where it's selected to go, and when I say yes, the alert sounds off.
Attention, attention. A tornado has been reported in this area. Go to the basement or lowest level possible in this building immediately. Move away from windows and doors. Seek shelter under large furniture. Do not leave this building. Shelter in place at this location until further notice.
Okay, so you saw a couple of things. That alert is going to go off again in a minute, and I'll cancel, and then we'll work through what you saw the system do. Okay, so we can cancel that. Off to the right on the help station, you saw a big word alert on the screen, and you also saw the text. You probably can't read it on your computer, but saw the same text information that the voice announcement contained, the instructions to go to a lower level in the building and to stay away from doors and windows, etc. That unit has a flashing light. That siren sounds off at about 95 decibels, and you get the voice and text information. On the map area, if you'd notice, all of the facilities on our demo system had lit up and were flashing orange to tell you they were in alert mode. And had we looked up at the active alerts across our status bar, we would have seen a tornado alert had been sent. Finally, in this alert window, we saw some information about the alert. We saw the same text that would be displayed on the screen. We saw the duration of the alert, how many times that would repeat. And as you saw, I have the ability to cancel that. If I sent that by mistake or another alert by mistake, I could cancel that immediately and manage things in that fashion. So that's how the software. We won't go deeper into the software, but that's a brief look at how this software works. One last thing, if you noticed, there was a pop-up during that alert that came up on the computer screen. So we can push out. That's one example of an integration that all the computer screens at your facility or your site could mirror the same alert message that's going out over the help stations and get people's attention. All of those things combine to try to get people's attention and get them to take action quickly in the event of a tornado warning.
So Tim, you talked about integration. One last point on emergency communication systems, facility-based systems, is system integration. Metasecure system offers a lot of integration options. So for tornado emergencies, for example, a valuable integration is with National Weather Service data feeds or NOAA weather radios. It's easy to set up the system so if a tornado warning is issued, the system alerts everyone automatically. You don't need a human there tracking things. It'll just tell everyone to shelter automatically. Some people prefer to use hardware to launch alerts instead of the software. If that's the case, it's easy to integrate buttons or key switches. So you can just hit a button and everything alerts. Very customizable that way. Other communication systems on-site and off can be integrated to make full use of existing investments and extend the system. So for example, alerts can be automatically sent through both the help stations and also existing PA systems, outdoor loudspeakers, and if you have email and text alert systems, it can go through those as well. If you have hazardous materials at your site, sensors can trigger the system to evacuate everyone if a certain level of dangerous material is detected. And finally, you can answer help calls on handheld radios or mobile phones if you'd prefer to do that rather than answer it through software. A lot of end users have off-site security operations centers that monitor their sites, and help calls can go to your third-party operations center as well. So it's got a lot of flexibility to customize to your needs and your site. So that's it for today. I hope this was informative. We'd be glad to set up an online or in-person demo or answer any questions you may have. Just give us a call or drop us an email. And thank you so much for joining us. Stay safe and have a great day.